How in the world do you rebuild relationships with those you love when I'm sorry means absolutely nothing anymore? Have you ever wondered how you're going to summon the courage, the patience, and compassion to rebuild strong family connections based on trust again? Welcome to an illuminating conversation featuring CMO and brand architect, executive coach, and TEDx advisor, and global storyteller award winner, Tucker Stein. Alcohol was Tucker's drug of choice when crushing anxiety became unbearable for him. Now, in his 8th year of recovery, he shares with us the journey of continually living amends as he regained the trust of his wife and family. His journey of recovery and reconnection is a testament to his intention, his vulnerability, and honestly, just grit. If you're open and eager to come out of the shadows of shame, stigma, and guilt, we've built a membership just for you. Stop navigating this journey alone. Join us at voicesencourage.com/thrive. Welcome to Thrive While Loving an Addict, and I'm joined today by Tucker Stein. We both have different sides of the aisle that we've walked on. Tucker dealing with his own substance use disorder and rebuilding of family relationships. And what we want to really hit on today is the notion that, I'm sorry doesn't hold any water anymore. And so how do you actually step by step, piece by piece, rebuild family relationships when your family is willing to walk that walk with you? And I know from my side of the aisle is, as somebody who loves my son very deeply and loved his dad also, was being open first to be willing to walk the walk and take the small steps and allow for the humanity for each side, because we're not perfect human beings. And when we have fallen down and gotten up on both sides so many times, it takes a lot of grace and a lot of forgiveness and an honest willingness to be vulnerable and continue to get back up and take the next steps. So we really wanted to kind of talk a little bit about what that actually looks like, sounds like, and feels like for those of you who are open to rebuilding the relationships with the person that you love. And how do you do that?
Very well said, and thank you, Kale. This topic is very near and dear to me specifically. About 10 years into this sober life, and again, every day is a new journey. But one of the things that we're taught as we're growing up, communication is everything. Use your words, use your words, that sort of thing. And we understand as we get older that, especially in relationships, that strong communication, healthy communication is very much a key to success. And the problem with substance use disorder is it is a complete breakdown in communication on all fronts. And most importantly, it starts with ourselves. And when we can't even communicate with ourselves, there's no way you can communicate with others.
What I was going to say was, I think it's important to remember that when you are actually in addiction mode or substance use disorder mode, you are not the person that we know and love.
No.
And I think it's really important for those of us who love people to remember that, because we're dealing with somebody whose brain has been hijacked. And so to expect them to show up differently than that hijacking is a little crazy, honestly. And what we're really doing is when they come out the other side and they are in recovery mode, and we're slowly but surely getting our loved one back, it's the patience on our part to allow the time for people's brains to heal and to allow the grace for quite a while, on both sides. So that's why I wanted to kind of...
You bring up a very good point, Kale, because, and they say it takes 9 months, even a year, for the brain to rewire itself when you're coming out of this lifestyle. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. And that was, 9 months to the day for me is when it really kind of clicked. But what's really, a lot of humility and finding grace and forgiveness, it's kind of like learning how to walk all over again.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily like hopping on a bike and everything comes back and it's like, oh yeah, I know how to ride a bike.
Hmm.
It really is going back and relearning almost your basic motor skills
Hmm.
because your way of which you communicated has been lost, but also the trust in the communication has been completely broken. So when we think about, and I always joke, when the kids were growing up, use your words, use your words. This is one of those moments where communication was no longer words, it was actions.
Hmm.
And that is really the definition for me what a living amends becomes. Because you can walk up to a loved one and say, I'm so sorry for what I did. I'm sorry for the things that I've done, where I've hurt you. And you kind of create an inventory to be able to accept responsibility and take accountability. But again, it's yes, that's the motion of
Hmm.
a step, right? Of the
Hmm.
12,
Hmm.
talk about the 12-step process. It's a step. But the problem is the very notion of a step means it doesn't end. It's something that has to keep going and going and going.
Hmm.
So, I remember specifically connecting with both, well, primarily my own immediate family, my wife, two kids, my parents, and then my in-laws, and being able to sit them down and say, listen, I know my words have literally become empty, broken promises. I totally get that. I accept responsibility. What I'm asking for specifically, and this is one of the hard things, you want to fix it. Everyone wants to fix it. Okay, you're sober, everything's fixed. No, the new journey begins, and the grace and the time that it takes to literally show how actions become the best form of communication,
Hmm.
it takes time. But for
Hmm.
me, relearning how to communicate, relearning how to manage my emotions, relearning how to manage my own anxiety that went undiagnosed for decades, and learning how to, going back to our own 5 acts of courage, what is that self-care talk that allows
Hmm.
myself to be able to communicate accordingly for me? Because my
Hmm.
communication was to not communicate at all. It was to escape. It was to numb whatever that is. So that's why this idea and this concept of living amends has become so incredibly, I would say, the single greatest building block for us to start new and build trust back. Because that's the
Hmm.
number one thing, honestly, with family members that goes is trust.
Right. And what I would say too is it's not just for the person who's dealing with the disease. It's also for the family too,
Mhm.
because we have to learn how to communicate clearly also. Like, what's our experience? And
Mhm.
to do it in a healthy way. And I mean, I do believe that depending on what your story is and what you have experienced is how do you really truly love someone and allow them the gift of reconnection. And that is also true for you too, as a loved one, is to allow yourself the gift of reconnection with this new person that you probably have really truly never seen before because they were dealing with the trauma of whatever they were dealing with and they were self-medicating in order to deal with it. So they're not even clear necessarily for quite a while as to who they really are on the other side of their recovery because they've never experienced it before.
Yeah. No, it is. And I think one of the analogies that when we started doing family therapy was you have to learn a new dance.
Mm-hmm.
And with dance comes technique, physical movement, mental movement, predicting the next step, communication, all of those kinds of things. You really do have to learn a new dance all over again. And
Mm-hmm.
you're right. This is where, it's communication's a two-way street. I can't tell you how many times we'll have a conversation. I'm talking with my wife or whatever it is, and there's this kind of awkward pause. And I kind of look and go, what? And she goes, I'm expecting you to react a certain way, but you're not doing that anymore.
Right, right,
And
right.
it's kind of we sit there and there's literally an awkward pause. And then you realize, oh, the rewire and the
Mm-hmm.
rewire of the relationship is starting and the
Mm-hmm.
trust is being built back. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, oh yeah, that was an old me, right?
Mm-hmm.
I start to see, oh yeah, I would have reacted this way. But now I have the healthy tools and the knowledge and the reconnection of myself to know how to manage and regulate my emotions in a way that creates intentional action that is, as we're taught, contrary to what we've actually conditioned ourselves during active substance use disorder.
Yeah.
It's it is pretty funny. I'm like here, and I can almost sense the pause, Kale. I'm like, she's expecting me to do this. Watch this. And in my mind, I'm going, there's going to be an awkward pause, and here it comes. And sure enough,
Uh-huh.
here comes the awkward pause. And
Right.
there's a chuckle, and sometimes there's frustration. Yeah, you're expecting to react a certain way, but
Hmm.
this is the sign. These are the signs that communication and trust are being rebuilt, and it is done
Hmm.
through action and not words.
Well, and on the love side, loved one side of the equation is, we have our own patterns that we've been running for a long time. And so, it's rewiring our patterns and being intentional about our patterns and making sure that we're choosing our words more intentionally, we're choosing our actions more intentionally on the other side of the dance. And it takes practice. And that's, I think, one of the crazy things about this is I think for a lot of loved ones, you think, oh, they're going to go to rehab and then we're going to get them back
Yeah.
and everything's going to be fine. And that is not how it rolls.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I want to touch on, this goes back to rebuilding and communication, is that first 9 to 12 months is critical, that an addict or someone who's in a recovery phase follows a very structured program, because you have to build back in behaviors and routines that become behaviors and routines. And one of the hard things for us as a family was, that first 9 to 12 months can very much come across to a family member as selfish, because it's like the old oxygen mask on the airplane. If you
Mm-hmm.
can't put your mask on first, there's no way you're helping somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's one thing I had to communicate over and over again. If I said, I need to do this for me, the hard part is, in order for me to be the best for you, I have to be the best for me first. And
Mm-hmm.
that was a really big challenge, was understanding the grace and the care that the person that's in recovery needs in
Mm-hmm.
order to be able to create a living amends.
Mm-hmm.
They have to amend themselves.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that's a
and I
really hard thing.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing is true for the loved one. Is we need to learn how to take care of ourselves too.
Yep.
And because we're generally focused on fixing you, and we let ourselves go and we go down the dark rabbit hole. And so, for Voices and Courage, it is shifting the paradigm, is that we need to take care of ourselves too, first and foremost, so that we can be there in a healthy, thriving way if and when our loved one kind of pops out the other side and into recovery and then goes through the process of recovery. You talk about 9 to 12 months. I mean, with Sam, I think about 18 to 24 months, because he was just hijacked for so long. And I don't know, honestly, because he's having to rebuild who he is,
Mhm.
and not back to who he was, because we're talking about childhood stuff here. He's having to rebuild himself into a new man, and that just doesn't happen overnight. Are you feeling hijacked by the chaos of your loved one's addiction? Are you experiencing sleepless nights of endless worry? It's actually time for you to break free and find the calm in your storm. There is no need to be stuck in the heartbreak, the isolation, the judgment, the shame, the desperation of your loved one's addiction. If you don't get anything else from this podcast, I want you to understand that, in fact, you can go from that place and you can thrive, no matter what choices your loved one's making. I've been where you are, and I understand exactly how you feel. That's why I want to extend a personal invitation to you to join Voices and Courage community. We created this safe space to give you the support and resources you need in order to be able to rise above your circumstances, get out of the hole of desperation, and actually learn to thrive in the midst of the chaos. Join the Voices and Courage community now, and let's walk this path together so you can find true healing. With our resources and compassionate members, you'll find the strength and understanding you need to thrive. Stop navigating this journey alone. Visit voicesandcourage.com/thrive to join today. Again, that's voicesandcourage.com/thrive. We can't wait to see you there.
Well, and you bring up a good point too. It's the rebuilding part is very much rooted in things that have happened in the past. So it's not a quick fix approach. And I've seen so many where relapse can often occur is the family's expectation
Mhm.
doesn't match the biological reality of what the loved one is going through or what the
Right.
addict is going through.
Yeah.
And it's not to critique the loved ones at all because there is this expectation of,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, sober, woo, here we go. And the
Hmm.
reality is the brain is hijacked and
Hmm.
we don't recover that fast.
Right. Right.
And for a lot of us, the reason why we went down that path was the brain wasn't functioning properly. So
Hmm.
if the brain wasn't functioning properly, there has to be a way to rewire in a way. And that's, I would say, one of the biggest frustrations we had, and a lot of arguments happened was,
Hmm.
why isn't this changing?
Hmm.
And it's like, well, change like this is not going to happen overnight. And the level of frustration and anger and confusion and hopelessness that came out of that first 6, 9, 12 months is
Hmm.
palpable. I mean,
Hmm.
it's rough.
Yeah.
I mean, to the point where, there were moments where it's like, okay, you need to live over here for a while, and you need to live over here for a while, and you need to be over here. Like there was literally everyone went to their own corners of
Corners.
the
Hmm.
to figure out, okay, how is this affecting me? How am I going to
Hmm.
rebuild me in this sense?
Yeah.
Uh,
And that's why I say it's super
yeah,
important for everybody to figure out how to take care of themselves.
yeah. Well, and that was a big moment for us. A reality check was the moment that someone who's going through it gets into recovery is typically they're starting to go like this, or yeah, like this, and then the loved
Hmm.
one starts to go
Hmm.
like this.
Hmm.
And the family members start to crash because they've been on fight and flight for so long that their
Hmm.
body's trying to like literally come down off the hamster wheel of addiction. And
Hmm.
it's like, I don't even know how to respond.
Yeah.
So it's often, the loved one that ends up suffering just as much in a different way when
Hmm.
the person gets sober. It's like nobody tells
Hmm.
you that either. It's like you have to go into therapy or something and learn about it. And that's one of the things that as Voices Encourage, we're trying to create is those resources and the stories, the ones that we're sharing right now, so that there is this awareness and
Hmm.
you don't have to suffer through trial and error.
Well, and although we're talking about living amends, I think it's important for people to understand that, like, I created, thriving and healthy and so on and so forth while my son was in full blown addiction.
Yep.
I was solid and healthy and whole when he went into recovery. And I've learned enough about the disease and the brain and so on and so forth to give him the time to breathe and to recreate himself anew with as little expectations, really, truly, as possible, other than I can see the heart of the man of who he is. And slowly but surely, that heart is getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And I'm still healthy and whole and living a life that I love while he's getting stronger.
Yeah. Well, and it for us, and it goes back to one of my favorite TED Talks of all time. Johan does this idea of everything you think about addiction is wrong. And the expectation is that sobriety is the solution. And the
Mm-hmm.
answer is it's not. And in his talk, he specifically says, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. And at the end of the day, that connection is the lifeline and the foundation of what a living amends means
Mm-hmm.
is reconnection. And you can
Mm-hmm.
only do that if you have actions that follow the words, because that's where the trust comes in.
Yeah. Well, and let's just think about on both sides of the equation how scary, intimate, vulnerable connection really is for most people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say, before I forget, one of a very close member of my family, it wasn't until 2 years ago, somewhere around year 8 of sobriety, that I found out he was still upset that I had not made amends to him and his
Mm-hmm.
wife.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about it, and it was one of those things where they didn't understand the concept of a living amends. So
Mm-hmm.
the moment I told him, I said, well, my fear was my apology was not enough. What we've been taught to rebuild relationships with family members is what we call a living amends. So I've spent the last 8 years focusing on my actions to speak louder than words, that would be my amends to you.
Mm-hmm.
Tears. Oh my gosh, I wish I understood that more. And clearly it wasn't communicated, but
Right.
all of a sudden that moment of, oh my gosh, it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't the words that were missing.
Mm-hmm.
It was the action of being able to say, by the way, the last 8 years of me rebuilding me and
Mm-hmm.
rebuilding with you,
Mm-hmm.
that in itself is what an apology and an amends looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the things, again, that aren't taught to family,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, it's just kind of
Right.
like
Right.
everybody goes
Yeah.
into sobriety, everything, well, everything's going to be wonderful. And no,
Yeah.
it's just not that way.
Yeah.
Um,
And that's why we're having this conversation is to help people better understand what does a living amend look like, sound like, and feel like, and understand it requires tremendous patience
yeah,
on both sides and lots of grace. And we all know that this journey is fraught with potentially relapse. Like in Sam's case, we in and out of rehabs like 12 times, but I can see the progress each time because I'm willing to see it. I'm willing to entertain the notion that every time there was progress, even though to some people looking at it from the outside, nah,
yeah.
you know?
Well, at the end of the day, the living amends concept saved our family
Mm-hmm.
because it really embodies communication, healing, recovery, words, actions, therapy, behavioral changes, emotional regulation changes. All of those things have to fall into some sort of structured program.
Mm-hmm.
And that isn't sobriety,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
The mere act of the mere definition of sobriety is to abstain from a particular action
Mm-hmm.
that is not causing good. So in that
Mm-hmm.
sense, abstinence from using
Mm-hmm.
isn't enough. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why we think about sobriety as like sobriety is not what you think it is. Recovery and the living amends. And again, the living amends saved our family. And again, it's just not taught. And it's not a
Mm-hmm.
if we knew more of that going into it, I think things would have been a little bit different. Even if you go through a 12-step program, even if you're doing all the things right, the education and communication about what's happening in the biology of the brain and the power of having to find literally learning a new dance and learning how to walk again and talk again. Yeah, it's very much unexpected.
Yeah, and that's why for loved ones, they need family services. They need to get educated about it. This isn't just about going to rehab. This is about the dance, the new dance, the recreation on the other side and how long it's going to take. And by the way, you need to also learn how to take care of yourself. You also need to learn how to communicate in a different way with somebody on the other side of recovery. And so both partners are learning stuff that they probably have never learned before.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
again,
and you realize the absence of a drink does not build trust.
mm-mm,
Just
mm-mm,
because you've sworn it off
mm-hmm,
does not mean things are hunky dory. And that was the number one thing, especially my wife and kids said is, you have to rebuild trust, and trust doesn't come from I'm sorry, and it doesn't come from abstaining from a drink. Show me.
right, right. Well, because the truth is, you can be somebody who doesn't drink and still be a jerk.
Oh, and that is a whole nother topic, KO, when the idea of dry drunk is no joke. And that
Mhm,
is that 9 to 12 month period that I was referring to. That's the dry drunk period.
mhm,
That is where literally your body is so dry that
mhm,
it is completely null and void of anything helpful. It's
mhm,
like you need to feed yourself with all those nutrients that come
mhm,
back. But yeah,
mhm,
I wasn't pretty.
mhm.
It's
Yeah.
not. That first 9 months was like,
Mhm.
you might as well go back and have a drink because you're way easier to deal with than you are now. But
Yeah.
you have to hit that different kind of chaos and that storm. in
Right.
order to come out on the other side.
Well, I think that highlights, Tucker, the importance of doing the work, the personal development work. And honestly, once you start down that path, hopefully you're always doing it, because we keep, if we stay alive, we're going to continue to change. We're going to continue to grow. We're going to continue to push the envelope of who we really are. Well, that takes vigilance in our own work. And so, really what we're talking about here is when it actually shows up like it has for you and your family, it's a freaking miracle.
Yeah.
Because everybody has to sign up to do the work.
Yep. They do.
And yeah, so then you're at choice as to whether you want to do the work or not.
Yeah. And I think I call it collateral beauty out of all of this is, and someone always said, Tucker, if you ever did a TED Talk, what would it be? And in the back of my mind, it's always been how alcohol restored our family values, which is really cool in the sense that the trauma that was the situation actually granted us permission to discover more emotional intelligence. Our kids are going to be more prepared than a lot of teens out there because they went through it, but they understand it and they're more prepared. If we can weather a marriage through something like this, it's creates strength beyond what you can imagine. So the great news is, and I'm saying this to all family members, there is a silver lining and there is collateral beauty on the other side, because you are forced into a situation where you have to learn about yourself, how to communicate with others, how you take care of yourself in a way that you've never done it before. And at the end of the day, it's its own professional and personal growth development program that you've created for yourself. And sometimes you don't even realize it. So
it's a constant
I don't recommend
choice.
going through substance use disorder to get there. But for those that have been put in that position and there's no control beyond it, is guess what? There is hope and there is an opportunity, but it probably isn't where you think it is. And it probably doesn't happen like it is.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to that whole notion of what is this here to teach me? And if you can embrace it on both sides, because inherent in walking this path, there's a lot of teaching, there's a lot of learning, there's a lot of stretching, there's a lot of growing for all parties concerned. So the notion that this is all here to teach us something is a powerful notion to live into.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to discuss this topic. It's something that I'm thinking now is kind of overdue and to a certain degree, but it's coming up a little bit more often, which is why it's fresh for me. But I hope this conversation was, for those that are in early family recovery, to know that it is a process and to know that there is this concept of, it'll fix itself now that the person is sober. Doesn't. But it is an invitation to explore and do work for yourself that you probably wouldn't have done before. But hopefully it gives a little bit of hope and understanding and education around what can be and and what it looks like. And that was my goal of today's conversation, was to shed some light on that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think this is a powerful reminder that it's a personal journey for everyone. So thanks for sharing.
And thank you for having me. I always love our conversations. You never know what's going to pop up until life is lifing, and things arise, and you realize, wow, that's a really big theme, and it needs to be shared. So I'm glad we're going to do that today for our listeners.
Me too. So keep thriving, people. Keep patience, grace, forgiveness forefront, and not just for the person that you love that has been dealing with substance use disorder, but for yourselves also.
And as my wife will say, learn that new dance.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
I want to thank Tucker again for being a part of our podcast. What a remarkable man. What was illuminating about our conversation was his genuineness in sharing the complexities of rebuilding relationships while also creating a new life of sobriety simultaneously. Inherent in healing family relationships is the importance of commitment, compassion, patience, and forgiveness in this process. It's not an easy task. And yet, on the other side, is a family that has been reborn. Thank you for joining us. If you're in a space and willing to come out of the shadows of shame, stigma, and guilt, we've built a membership just for you. Stop navigating this journey alone. Join us at voicesencourage.com/thrive.